Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine physicists seeing something. Well, something they thought was impossible. A kind of light that, based on everything we knew, just shouldn't exist. It wasn't behaving normally, not reflecting or scattering like you'd expect. But there it was, stable, organized, holding its shape.
Yeah, that's the mystery we're tackling today. It all comes from this really interesting article, The Light That Shouldn't Exist, Motion Sculpted into Reality.
So that's our source. And our mission, I guess, is to figure out, what is this stuff? Why did it break the rules of physics? And what's this other explanation, motion theory, all about?
Exactly. It's like we're trying to piece together a glimpse of maybe a whole new way reality operates. It started, interestingly, not as some accident, but a very specific experiment.
Right, the setup. So they had this piece of gold,
But specially prepared, etched with these incredibly tiny nanoscale patterns.
Okay, super fine details. And then they hit it with a laser.
Yep. And not just any laser beam. It was a twisted beam. It had this property called orbital angular momentum. Basically, the light waves had a kind of spin.
Which matters for how it hits the surface.
Precisely. Now, the expectation, honestly, it was for maybe some faint, messy interference patterns, stuff that would just fade out really quickly.
Kind of like noise.
Exactly, background noise. But what they actually got were these, persistent, organized light structures, like tiny vortexes almost.
You called them skyrmion bags, or structured loops.
That's right. And the key thing, the really weird part, was that they were stable. They just stayed there, not a quick flash.
Okay, so hold on. Classical optics, the standard physics of light.
Yeah.
What did that say should happen?
Well, like we said, it predicted any interference would be fleeting, disorganized, gone in an instant. Light normally hits a surface and it reflects or it diffracts or it scatters, right?
Yeah.
Hitting this super pattern gold, maybe you get some complex scattering, but it should dissolve. Chaos, basically.
But instead, they got stable, coherent shapes.
Directly contradicting the predictions. A real anomaly.
Which is why I guess it got sidelined.
Pretty much. Because the existing models just couldn't make sense of it, the mainstream reaction was largely, okay, that's an interference artifact.
Just a weird glitch. Don't worry about it.
Kind of, yeah. Not something fundamental. But that's where this other idea comes in. Motion theory.
Okay.
They looked at this result and said, hold on, maybe this isn't a glitch at all.
Maybe it's important.
Maybe it's a huge clue.
Yeah.
Their core idea is fascinating. They suggest what was seen wasn't weird light, but actually evidence of synchronized motion loops stabilizing on a sync-compatible surface.
Whoa, okay. Synchronized motion loops, that's different. So the light we see isn't energy moving in the usual sense.
Not according to them. It's more like a synchronization event, an underlying motion suddenly clicking into place, becoming visible because it's found a rhythm, a harmony.
Okay, let's break that down. Synchronized motion loops, sync-compatible surface. What does that mean in practice? Let's start with the gold.
Right. So motion theory says the nano-etching isn't just a passive surface feature. It makes the gold act as a rhythmic substrate.
Rhythmic substrate, like it has its own beat?
Sort of, yeah. Think of it as having an inherent rhythm or vibration at a really fundamental level, a sync boundary.
Okay, so the gold surface has a beat, and the laser, the twisted one.
They describe that as a phase-pulsed motion system. So you've got this input of structured motion.
It's its own kind of pulsar phase.
Exactly, directed at this rhythmic surface.
So what happens right at that meeting point? It's not just bouncing off.
No, motion theory says it's a resolution into coherent structured motion. This is where their big idea comes in, that everything fundamentally is motion.
Right.
So the theory suggests the laser's motion patterns interact with the gold's inherent rhythm. And if the conditions are just right, they sync up. They find a compatible rhythm, and that synchronization is what we see as these stable, organized light shapes.
Okay, this is where it gets really wild, isn't it? Because motion theory is saying those shapes, those skyrmion bags, they aren't actually light particles or waves doing weird things.
Correct. They call them topological motion signatures.
Topological motion signatures, like a knot in a string. The knot exists because of how the string is, not because something is flowing through it.
That's a great analogy, actually. The structure, the pattern, is stable because of the configuration of the underlying motion, not because energy is constantly flowing through that shape in a traditional way.
So these light structures are patterns of motion?
Exactly. Manifestations of synchronized motion. They didn't travel there or scatter into that shape. They resolved into existence right there at the interface.
Wow. Okay.
And this is the huge shift motion theory proposes. It's not about finding weird light. It's about realizing we might be able to, well, sculpt motion itself.
It's sculpted motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What looked like light forming these shapes was, in their view, a localized rhythmic collapse. Like a point where the underlying motion found stability, found sync, and sort of collapsed into a visible, ordered state. And crucially, they argue, no energy was transmitted like a wave to make these forms.
So if light isn't a particle or a wave in this theory, what is it?
Fundamentally, they say light is structured motion that only appears when a system hits sync resolution.
Sync resolution.
Think of it like two gears clicking perfectly into place. When they mesh, you get a stable output, right? That output wasn't there before. It's the result of the synchronized movement.
Okay.
Motion theory suggests light is like that output. It's what we see when fundamental motion finds that moment of synchronization.
That actually makes the stability part make more sense than calling it an artifact.
Right. If it's a stable state of motion, it's not inherently supposed to dissipate instantly.
And if everything is fundamentally motion, syncing up, could that explain other weird physics stuff? The article mentioned things like light teleportation and these skyrmions just popping into existence.
Absolutely. Motion theory provides a potential framework. So light teleportation might not be a particle instantly jumping. It could be the pattern of underlying motion shifting rapidly. Imagine ripples on water. A peak vanishes here, appears there. Not instantaneous water movement, but the ripple pattern reforming.
Okay. So the pattern resolves somewhere else.
Exactly. And the skyrmion bags appearing isn't creation from nothing. It's more like pre-existing, maybe chaotic motion, suddenly finding the right conditions, the right rhythm, and stabilizing into that observable, structured form.
So it all circles back to motion and finding that synchronization. The article also mentioned this idea of a sync field. What's that about?
The sync field, well, as motion theory sees it, that's the fundamental sort of fabric of reality where these rhythms and the potential for synchronization exist. This experiment with these weird light structures isn't just a curiosity. They see it as giving us a signature, a glimpse of this underlying field in action.
So the patterns appearing and disappearing isn't random.
No, it's tied to the stabilization and destabilization of sync within that field. When the rhythms match up, motion syncs, structure appears.
And when they fall out of sync?
The structure dissolves back into the sort of background sea of fundamental motion.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. What looked like impossible light, these stable patterns, motion theory interprets as essentially sculpted motion, a moment where the basic motion of reality got organized, got synchronized on this special gold surface.
Precisely, and potentially a first hint of this fundamental sync field governing it all.
That really turns things on their head, doesn't it? Compared to thinking about particles and waves as the ultimate reality.
It absolutely does. It challenges that standard model. Motion theory suggests motion itself is primary. Particles, fields. Maybe they're just different ways that fundamental motion organizes itself when it finds stability, when it synchronizes.
It definitely gives you a lot to think about. This wasn't just weird light in the lab. It was, like the article put it, motion caught in the act of becoming.
A beautiful way to phrase it.
Yeah. So think about that, Lyrical. What if reality, deep down, isn't made of tiny bits or waves spreading out, but it's this constant underlying dance of motion, structuring itself, adapting, and what we see and interact with is just that motion falling into rhythm, into sync, even if just for a moment.
It's a whole different way to view existence.
Definitely something to mull over long after this deep dive.